These are some of the things that we think could crash the housing market in Florida.
And we're getting started right now. The first one, and I don't think this one is likely anymore, but interest. Interest going up. You would think if there was anything that could have crashed or really brought down the home prices, that was it. We have seen a flattening from that, but
slight correction.
Yeah, things have held pretty strong, and I don't think if it's crashed yet from that, probably won't, but if it gets even higher, who knows? It could happen at that point. But we said this on the channel a lot of times, with the interest rates going up, no one really wants to sell their house and then buy a high interest house that's basically gonna be the same size as theirs or smaller when they have this low interest rate. It just doesn't make sense for a lot of people.
So less demand, but also less supply. Reason number 2 is insurance and roof costs. If insurance continues to go up,
and be harder to get.
Yes, people will have trouble affording their monthly mortgage because your payment will go up. And roofs are getting more and more expensive, especially after the hurricane. It almost doubled, I would say, in price.
Yeah.
And insurance companies can actually drop your policy if your roof is 15 years or older.
Yeah, those things can all make a lot of extra costs to your monthly bill that maybe you weren't seeing, and now it's unaffordable, and then because of that, maybe you want to sell, and that could help increase supply in the state. Number 3 reason, and it ties in very closely with that, is hurricanes and flooding. So not the insurance for it and the roof, but the damage that it causes and just the stress and all those sort of things. It might be enough to make a lot of people say, hey, I'm out of here. And because of that, you could see an increase in supply. We haven't seen a mass exodus from Florida after Hurricane Ian, and there was another hurricane, I forgot the name of it, that hit Daytona. So they literally got hit twice. They got hit by Ian and that other hurricane, and Ian literally went across the state. Got rocked pretty bad in the Gulf Coast, really. I mean, Fort Myers all the way up to where we live in Venice was probably about the northern edge where it got hit pretty hard. And yeah, that wasn't enough to really make supply shoot up, but you never know. If we get another one this summer, maybe people's sentiments would change.
Yes. Next reason is rents continuing to go up. For many people, that actually pushes you out of the city that maybe you were born in, or you were living there for like 10, 20 years, and now you can't afford those rent prices. That's why we always say, if you can purchase a home, purchase it, because you're not paying your landlord's rent, you're paying your own rent, per se, and that mortgage amount, it's never going to go up unless your insurance goes up a little bit and taxes, it'll go up a little bit, but $100, $200 a month, not like $500, $600 a month.
Yeah, and we know some people whose rent literally doubled. So that's something that is not going to happen with your mortgage unless something really, really, really crazy happens with property taxes and insurance costs.
And even with property taxes, there is a cap of how much they can increase. Even though rents did go up throughout the country, there are still some states like the Midwest that are still quite affordable. So some people that maybe live in Florida already would want to move, to the Midwest because it is more affordable there. Or people, instead of wanting to move into Florida, they would want to go to the Midwest and live more comfortably.
Yeah,
there.
or even some, other like Georgia or, just other states nearby could be cheaper depending on the city you're looking to move to. Yeah, and that could also add the supply in the area and make it difficult for investors too to maybe rent out their places, and now they have to drop prices. So, there could be sort of a domino effect from something like that. One thing to note too is rent prices have dropped. So, I think that's another part of it. If landlords can still afford to pay their mortgage, like I'm sure a lot of them had their mortgage at such and such price, and well, since they could increase that rent, they did, but a lot of them have dropped it down, but they're still coming up probably ahead from where they were just 2 years ago.
Yes.
And it's still a little bit higher and maybe still makes it affordable. So that's kind of the flip side of that coin. The next one, it kind of ties in with that, but it's also affecting people possibly with mortgages, and it's affordability for the wages here in Florida. That's definitely an issue. The thing about Florida, though, is it's kind of a tricky state to just judge based on the wages, because there's a lot of people that buy homes cash down here. There's a lot of people that are down here that are retired that don't necessarily rely on wages to pay for their rent or their mortgage. So that does need to be considered. But yes, wages definitely haven't kept pace for the people that do need to work here and be able to afford rent or their mortgage. And if they're not being able to live here, then they can't work those jobs that all the people that don't need to work down here use to be entertained, because a lot of what the jobs are down here involve hospitality, entertainment, and sales, retail.
If we don't have, the younger people that are able to do those jobs, then that could be a big big issue.
Yeah, it would definitely change, I think, the perception, if there's not things to do or places are understaffed, you come down to Florida, you're not feeling like you're having a good time because of that maybe. That could maybe be a possible trickle-down effect from that too.
Next one is new construction. If we have builders that continue to build and not have buyers to buy those homes, that could be a big issue. But that's not what's happening right now. Builders are actually pacing themselves to the demand, so there is quite a bit of new construction going on, but for the most part, those homes are called for. And in the instance that they are not, the builders are willing to negotiate with buyers, and you're actually able to get a deal on those new construction homes.
Yeah, it's not, again, like we said on previous videos, 2008 where they were just building like crazy and people were getting mortgages that shouldn't have and all that kind of stuff. It's not the same thing as what's happening right now. We'll link that video in the description if you want to watch the previous video we did about why the market won't crash. The next reason that the market could crash, and I think this is probably one of the more maybe not likely, but if it happens, a scenario that could cause the crash, because I think a lot of these are maybe it could cause it, but this one is a big one, and it's if there's a big recession and lots of layoffs, that could definitely trigger some freed up supply because now people maybe have foreclosures, are forced to sell a home, and then big inventory being added and deals to be had. And just if there's foreclosures out there and people can get those at those prices, and the ones that aren't foreclosed on still kind of brings the values of those down because people have other options. So I think that if it does happen, which the jury's still out on if we're going to see a big recession. I think right now it's like 60% of people think there will be more of a crash. 40% at this time of analysts say that there won't be a crash. We're going to have a soft landing. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think if there is a big recession and lots of layoffs, that's probably the most likely one that could really cause a real estate crash.
Another reason is inflation. If prices, interest, food, gas is still high, then it is a lot more difficult for people to be able to afford their mortgage, because all of that adds up and it is a lot of extra money a month. And maybe you were stretching your budget as it is, so if all that stuff goes up, it's going to make it even more difficult to be able to afford the mortgage. And a lot of Americans were already living paycheck to paycheck, so increases on all the essentials would be a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah, you would think again, that's one of the more likely causes of a crash. But again, we've had this crazy inflation and it seems like they're starting to get in control, and we've had it for about a year and a half now maybe. And if that doesn't cause a crash yet, I don't know if it will. Maybe again, we're seeing the start of it right now because things are kind of flat. This one is very specific to Florida, and it's something that happened fairly recently, and it's the new immigration law. We might see some issues, and we've definitely noticed this with construction crews and roofing crews and people still getting roofs replaced and repaired from Hurricane Ian. And a lot of the migrant workers that were doing those jobs are leaving the state. So now you're going to see a little bit of a slowing down of those things. So in some ways that's going to probably bring supply down, but that's also bringing down demand too, because those people also need to live here and, live in houses and rent houses and all that sort of thing. So it's kind of a double-edged sword because they're not working. Now it's going to take longer for houses to get repaired, for new houses to get constructed, but that entire workforce of people that would live here will no longer live here, bringing down demand and freeing up supply.
Yes, and we're already seeing the consequences of this new immigration law. Unfortunately, a lot of new construction homes are not being finished on time for buyers that went under contract a few months ago or a year ago, and their homes were supposed to be ready by, say, August. Well, now we don't have the workers to finish those homes, so we don't know when those homes are going to be finished, is basically what it comes down to. And that's very unfortunate for buyers that already had their whole life and plans of moving into their home by July or August or whatever that date is, and now we're telling them, I'm sorry, or the builder actually is telling them, I'm sorry, but I don't know when your home's gonna be done.
Yeah, and that can kind of sour someone's sentiment towards the state. Maybe say, hey, maybe I wanna go to a different state or whatever the case may be. We'll get into that in a little bit with one of the other points, but yeah, I think that sentiment is a very important thing for people to wanna be here too. So that migrant issue is very multi-pronged for both the people that do want to move here, the migrants themselves, the construction process. There's a lot of factors. Next reason that there could be a crash in Florida is, for a long time, Florida had this sort of allure, number one, for the weather, the palm trees, the beaches, the Disney, all that kind of stuff, right? But the other part that went with that was no state income tax. That's still there. but it was also a very affordable place to get this tropical paradise type home, your winter getaway, whatever. And now prices have finally kind of caught up to, again, like we said, like with Venice where we live, you know, what they should have been. Yes. You know, you just felt like it was this amazing deal, and it's not that amazing deal anymore. It's now kind of like, that's probably what it should have always been. And because of that, you know, for some people like, oh yeah, I'll just go get an extra house in Florida because it's not that expensive and I can afford it. It's not what it used to be anymore. It's not that crazy value that it used to be.
And actually there are some homeowners that are thinking about listing their home because of that. It's their second home, and with insurance premiums going up and tax, in some instances HOA assessments and HOA fees going up, people are not finding this to be a very feasible second home. So now they're thinking about potentially selling. So if a lot of people think of sell, that could be a big issue.
And if you are looking to sell a home,
I would love to help you. I am a local realtor here, 941-221-1897.
Call or text anytime. We hear from people all the time. We love it. We'll always have your back.
Another reason is if a lot of people decide that they want to move out. There's a lot of different reasons why people want to move out. Maybe there's a better job opportunity somewhere else. Sometimes people decide that they cannot deal with the heat because it does get pretty hot here in Florida in the summer, and they just decide that, you know, this is not for me. I'm going back up north because the summers there are beautiful. And there's a lot more reasons why people end up leaving Florida. We'll have a link in the description box below to a video with some more reasons.
Next reason we could potentially see a crash is maybe because some of the reasons that we've covered so far and some of the ones we're gonna go over yet, there's just less demand. You know, people maybe just decide they don't wanna move here. And also I think with that, just, you know, less migration because some of that, you know, sort of COVID motivation's gone. You know, a lot of people are calling people back to the office. There's not all these, you know, new opportunities to work from home at jobs that were typically office jobs. Like, and just think a lot of people, you know, during the pandemic were just like, I need a change. I need to go somewhere where I can be outside, or, you know, having year-round summer here basically was, you know, a factor. And some people like the laws here as far as, you know, less masks and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that's kind of gone now. So there's less of that extra push for people to move. So I think all those factors combined could maybe lead to a little bit less of that, you know, extra oomph for people that like feel like they really need to move to Florida and move here ASAP.
Another reason would be if investors decide to sell. And for the market to crash, a lot of investors would have to decide to sell all at the same time. So we would have a lot of inventory and maybe not a lot of demand, which could cause the market to crash. Maybe a lot of the Airbnb hosts decide that it's not feasible for them to do the Airbnb, or maybe they're not making as much money as they would like, and they end up selling as well. Kind
of has been the case more as of late. Airbnb, you know, you've probably seen the articles not being as profitable as it was before.
With investors too, if they bought within the last 2 years and they went in the deal thinking that they could charge a certain amount per rent, and then they would be able to maybe pay the mortgage on it and have some money left over. Well, if rents do come down, then they can't really hold on to that property because they wouldn't be making any money. That monthly rent payment would just go directly to the mortgage if they do have a mortgage on it. So they might be forced to sell on the cheap.
Another reason that potentially the market could crash here is, well, Florida kind of became, I mean, it was always somewhat of a destination, but it became really like a hot spot. Like it was the place people wanted to move to big time over the last 2 years. And we've seen this happen with a lot of other states throughout the years. You know, there's been trends. It was California back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, a little bit in the early 90s. You know, during the pandemic, it was here. Texas has been kind of a hot spot for the last 10 to 15 years, especially
Colorado.
Certain cities. Colorado kind of had its wave. So you kind of see these different states trend from time to time, and maybe our time is a little bit towards the tail end, and then there's going to be a new state maybe where that becomes the new spot where everyone wants to move to. And that could sort of, you know, put the attention on those states, take it off us a little bit, and then make them the focus. I think that's something that we'd maybe see a little bit more down the road, you know, but you never know. The world is ever changing. There's all kinds of things that are happening. You know, who saw the pandemic coming, you know, and there's always things, you know, with politics or you name it. There's just all these different reasons why maybe someone would decide they do or don't want to be somewhere. And maybe we could see that change over the next couple of years, or just, again, some other state becomes like the apple of everyone's eye and that's where they want to go.
If you're looking to buy or sell your home in the area, make sure to call, text, or email us. I am a local realtor here, 941-221-1897.
Call or text anytime, whether you're looking to buy or sell in the next few days or the next few months. We'll always have your back. We hear from people all the time and we love it.
Subscribe and turn all notifications on, and
live breezy.